Hello, adventurer. It's good to see you. You have made it to the morning grind.
Welcome, welcome.
It's the live stream at the beginning of the Geekverse, where we talk about all types of topics in geekdom, gaming, and fantasy, with an emphasis on being constructive and creating the things that we want to exist in the world.
It's all on the grind, Sizemore. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
That's exactly right. There are a lot of adventures to be had today. Dungeons to explore and monsters to slay, and who knows what a random encounter might send our way. That's why we have to prepare, so settle in now for the morning grind with your favorite beverage in hand.
Tea? Or maybe something a little stronger. I've got a few bottles of the old Wynyard left.
Whatever you want. Pull up a chair. If you're feeling fancy, how about a cappuccino? Or a frappuccino? Or how about an espresso?
Just tea, thank you.
Sounds good to me, Gandalf. Whatever you want. I'm just glad you're here.
Everyone is welcome. You can just watch if you want. You don't have to worship anything you don't want to worship.
Thank you, Mike. But be forewarned.
Sometimes we get really strange characters around here.
Wait, what's that you say? Why can't you come and be a part of the stream?
My wife would disown me.
Oh no, I bet she'll be fine with it. Come on in.
Am I scared for my safety? No.
What are we supposed to do?
Everybody do the secret handshake.
Secret cultist handshake.
Oh, now do wizards who love each other.
This, my friend, is a science.
I still don't have gifts, but it's fine.
It's all on the grind, son. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
Dude, this would be a sick place to bring the band.
Indeed it would be, Dave. It really would. I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Oh, look, here's someone new.
Is this the cultist meetup?
Yes it is.
Come to hang out? Please accept me. I have nothing else.
Okay, we accept you. Everyone's welcome here.
Brought some snacks.
Well, that makes things even better.
You want some coffee? I don't drink coffee. You sure?
It's cultist coffee.
What makes it cultist coffee? I'm a cultist and I'm drinking it. Oh. Then I'll have some.
What exactly is going on here?
I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. It's so great to have you. Oh, and look, here comes another stranger.
Can we help you?
Yes, fellow cultists. I could really use some food.
Oh yeah? Welcome. We have donuts.
Oh, it's me. I'm glad I'm here. I'm sure you have a few questions for me, though.
What's your name? Who do you work for? What god do you worship?
Great questions, Rob.
I'm Steve King, and I worship Nyarlathotep.
No, not really. I'm just Heath, and I won't be worshiping anything this morning. But I will be your host. Welcome to the office. We're going to have a great time. I've got my coffee ready, because now it's time for the morning grind.
If you could become a fish, that would be amazing. Then I could command you with my mental fish powers.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Happy Easter. It is good to see you this morning. I know it is the holiday, so I know lots of people will be out headed to have lunch with families, maybe at church services, things like that. But those of us who are here, we're going to have a good time. And we're going to be talking about Daggerheart today. We just barely got started looking at Daggerheart the other day, just basically to see what was in the playtest. We started looking at other things, though. But today, I thought would be a good day to actually go into Daggerheart. One of the other things that I want to look at that we haven't is Moria. I believe that the Moria, like at least, was that an early version or was it some kind of digital version? Of the Moria book from Free League is out, and I want to look at that one as well. But we also are about to get started on some other things that are creating some other things here, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But man, it has been crazy. It has been crazy over the past week. Let's see who we got here. We got James. James is here. It has not slowed down over this past week. Charlie, good morning, Charlie. We've got Lynn. Good morning, Lynn. And Mike. And Patrick Fitzpatrick. Welcome. Good to see you this morning. Great to have everybody. Yeah, well, I was told that. I was told that, and I thought I got some type of email about more. In fact, let me make sure. Let me see if I can see that in my inbox because I made it. I made a check of that, and somebody mentioned it. I think here, Moria. Let me just see if something comes up in my inbox. Okay, today we can finally share. This was on March 20th. Check out the, okay, it's the 5E Alpha is what this says this is. Okay, so there it is. Hey, Robert. Good morning, Robert. Okay, so yeah, that was it. So look, what I'm saying here, what I'm seeing here is on March 20th, it says, hello again. Today we can finally share the Alpha PDF. Okay, Alpha PDF of the Moria Shadows of Khazad-dûm, the 5th edition of the Moria expansion. So that's what came out. So, and I haven't gotten to look at it yet. I haven't even been able to download it. So that's one thing that we could look at maybe next week, or who knows? Maybe I could. I have a feeling that Daggerheart's can take a lot today, though. But I want to look at some other things next week as well. But yeah, let's see. Hey, let's see. I'm not sure if this is this a serious question? I don't think. Do you want to make a Bitcoin RPG? No. I've got plenty of tasks on my plate, similar to Yahtzee, but there's a market maker and traders. No, Bitcoin RPG. Interesting. I'm sure somebody has thought about that. Hey, instead of winning, earning gold in the dungeon, earn Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. Good morning, Robert. Good morning. Happy Easter. Good to see you. Let's see. Okay, so last week I didn't even have a car. Last week I was in the middle of a bunch of disaster trying to get out to Austin. So last Sunday, I had no car. Well, so I had to deal with all of that while I was gone, rental cars and all of that. Did get the car repaired. Got my car back, my truck back. So that's good. So I was able to recover that and start living life again. Went out to Austin on Tuesday for Doug's book launch. And I should have the copy of the book here, but I don't have the copy of the Heroine's Labyrinth here. But I went out, had a fantastic time, and really enjoyed seeing you guys on stream on Tuesday night. I got the Austin bug. I didn't really get into Austin because we were up north in Round Rock. So we were at the suburb that was just north of Austin. And but I still had a fantastic time. I've got to go back out there and visit. I got to visit Austin. I got to visit Brianna out in Denver. I need to get out to LA too. So eventually I'm just gonna have to make that trip. Maybe sooner rather than later. That would be fun. Good morning, Interlight. Good morning. But had a fantastic time Tuesday night with Doug, with all of you on stream. I highly recommend. Okay, let me put this up. So I did live stream. If you have not, basically that was the culmination of everything that was Heroine's Labyrinth. So let me go over here to live. Of course, we did the virtual launch party, which was fantastic. If you haven't seen that, you really need to. If you want to see what happened in Austin, I streamed briefly from Austin for about 38 minutes here, so you could see what actually happened here in Austin. Here, I'll put this link over here. This is the live streams, Table Talk live streams. So actually, it was basically almost exactly 1 year when Doug first came on the Table Talk channel. That's a separate channel. If you are coming in here, that's a separate channel. We decided to differentiate these as far as branding goes. So it was almost exactly 1 year. I think Doug said that found out that yesterday was the 1 year anniversary of the first time that he was on Table Talk. So it basically took 1 year to go from our discussions to a complete Heroine's Labyrinth book, launched in Austin on Tuesday. I flew back on Wednesday and then walked in the door here at 6:30 p.m. and then immediately did another live stream with Brianna and Doug, watching Brianna's short film called The King. She designed it as a directorial, basically learning experience test project for different directors' techniques. And so I walked right in, then we sat down. Brianna had to do, for different reasons, had to do her discussion last week. And so we did it on a non-standard time on a Wednesday instead of Tuesday or a Thursday. but we got it. We got it. So we got it done. That was great. So and then the next morning I went to work. That was Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So yeah, for the past 3 days, then I went to work 8 to 10 hours at the winery, and now I'm here. And now it's Easter and there's no work, so I'm here with you guys. I've been out on the vines though. When I was out on the vines yesterday, planning everything that's going to come now, because I feel like we're on the other side of so much now that we're on the other side of the Heroine's Labyrinth. Now the Heroine's Labyrinth is actually launched. I think that's a mental hurdle so that we can start going and doing other things. Trips can be vital to the creative process and just plain old relaxing, especially when you get a hotel and don't have to worry about making a bed and cleaning the bathroom. Well, when I was there on Tuesday night, I was very grateful that Sable Phoenix let me stay with him. So I actually was hanging out with Sable. Not only did I get to hang out with Doug, I never met Doug in person before, but Sable Phoenix, by chance, as he's mentioned in the stream before, has moved out to Round Rock, the exact same place where Doug lives, by chance. And so, Doug had all, family and everything over for his book launch and things like that. So I crashed at Sable Phoenix's place. And so I didn't make the bed because it was a air mattress. I had to clean up the air mattress, but I didn't make the bed, and I didn't clean his bathroom while I was there. So it was, so that was crazy. So now I'm getting back to it. All right. So that's what's going on Table Talk next Tuesday. So I got to make up all these thumbnails and things like this. Next Tuesday, we are having Lucy on. We were thinking about lots of people to have on, because really, now the big thing that I'm working on, Sable was asking, so what's the next big project that's got to be done? And really the next big project that's got to be done is the Cultists. Well, we got here. The Cultists. It's time for the Cultists to launch. I've already started advertising this a little bit. I've been running tests for advertising. But we're going to start putting out stuff for the Cultists very soon. I'm actually thinking about dropping the entire first season, just going ahead and putting the entire first season of the Cultists up here on the channel, but then trying to have people related to that on Table Talk, and then also try to reach out to some other people to go on their shows, perhaps have me or Brianna on other people's shows related to promoting the Cultists, because the Cultists is good enough that it needs to be watched. I think that if people see it, they're really going to like it. If you don't know, the Cultists is the web show that Brianna and I made. I was the producer and the co-writer. Brianna's the co-writer and the director. This is a show about modern day Lovecraftian cultists who just want to worship Cthulhu in a world full of people who don't understand. And so I've been thinking about this while I was in the vineyard a lot last week and trying to wrapping my head around the plan to launch here. So if you are not on the Cultists, I would really appreciate it. This is the big thing right now. So let's see how big we can drive the Cultists. Hey, good morning, Moon Swan. And good morning, Jason. Good morning. Someone has a random question coming in from Twitter. Okay, let's take a funny and random question, I guess. So that's really the next big target. But Lucy, on Tuesday, Lucy's going to be here. Lucy Williams, who is the keyboardist for Moby. She briefly stopped in on Doug's live stream. She's also the one that did all of the music for Doug's book. Hey, good morning, Wild Barley. Good morning. Good to see you this morning. Lots of people here this morning. Lots more than I thought might be here since it's Easter. So Lucy's going to be here on Tuesday, but then we're going to start coordinating. We need to also get Doug on some other podcasts. And I know that on Discord, people had started a list of potential shows to reach out to put Doug on, because now that Doug has his book out there, Doug also needs to go on podcasts. I need to go on some for the Cultists, I think. Perhaps do some show exchanges with people for Table Talk and on their shows to talk about the Cultists and things like that. So that's, I was taking notes on all of that. So that's where we're going. That's where we're going next. That's the big project now that we're over the Heroine's Labyrinth. But the other big project that is going on, I guess this is the big project that's the smaller project, is RavenCon. And I have got to send out emails about all of that. That is next week. Okay, so that's one of the things I got to do this afternoon is make sure that I start emailing everybody about RavenCon, I got to set up tickets. That's not what I wanted. There we go. I got to set up tickets. We got to get all of that going. If you would like to play board games with us, tabletop games online in our virtual coffee shop, then you please sign up right here and I will send you the emails about this. So tickets will go on sale soon. Maybe I don't actually send out the email since it's Easter today, but I want to get everything set up this afternoon. And then maybe, right, exactly, next week. And then Monday, Tuesday, something like that, we'll put out the tickets for people to come and get it. We might be large enough that we'll be running 2 tables. I want to grow. Yeah, I want to grow, but I want to make sure that we've got all of the oh, Charlie can't make that one. Can't make this one. Work season starts that day. So we might be able to run 2 tables this time. I want to run 2 tables so we have 2 different groups of people going at one time, and then because I'm set up that we can have a lot of different tables going. That requires more scheduling, but we've kind of been easing into this by starting small, which I think is good. I think it's good to get the process down, and also people can learn what the whole thing is and how to use it. That way, as we expand, people can teach other people. Okay, so that's basically what we've got going on. Yeah, the cultists. I've got the dice giveaway. I've got the $500 dice giveaway to go along with the cultists. I didn't want to start all of this until I was ready. But we're going to be giving away $500 worth of dice, which actually you can get to when you've signed up for RavenCon. It will also send you a link to go sign up for the $500 worth of dice, which are all Elder dice, which are Cthulhu-themed dice, which goes well with the cultists. So my major priorities over the next, let's say it's probably going to be at least 2 months, month and a half, something like that, to 2 months, is to get RavenCon growing and also to get the cultists growing. And then we'll do a game because we've got games for the cultists as well. So we'll talk about those probably next Sunday because I want to do the RPG for it. And then we've got a tabletop party game as well. Social deduction game. So for the cultist that's themed. So I'm thinking that the idea, I'm not sure, we got to have a lot of people for the party game in order to put that into production, obviously, because that would be something that would be manufactured. The RPG could be done digital and print on demand and things like that. So I'm gonna see what kind of interest that we've got and then see what type of project we want to run for the cultists. All right. So is there anything else I'm missing? Oh, Robert's talking about the GPT. Good news on GPT. The attack and damage modifiers now work in the combat round function. Now need NPC modifiers and the NPC party modifiers. Lots of variables to go. Save game works too. Excellent. Excellent. Really cool. Okay, so let's go ahead and breathe and sip. Please hit the like button. Maybe people would like to come in and talk about Daggerheart here. So, got your drink? I've got water this morning. Needed some water this morning. Now, we could maybe we should have some wine here from the winery. Early morning, maybe not. Oh, I guess we should have had like some red wine here for Easter or something. Early in the morning, I don't know. But I just have water this morning. So whatever your favorite beverage is this morning, let's not forget to breathe and sip this morning. And then we'll get into Daggerheart. I know a lot of people have already gotten into that. I was seeing discussion on the in the Discord server, but I was intentionally not reading anything on the Discord server related to Daggerheart, and I haven't watched any other reviews regarding Daggerheart yet. So I'll be going into it fresh. All right. Let's take 2 deep breaths. In through the nose. Complete complete inhales through the nose, complete exhales through the mouth, and then take a sip of your favorite beverage here. So here we go. And sip. That was good. That was good. It's always good to be back here for a breathe and sip in the morning. Okay. So let's get into Daggerheart. I am curious. I am curious. Oh, and by the way, also regarding the winery, of course, he was like, "Can you think of any other events that we could have here at the winery to run?" Of course. Then I'm like, "Yeah, I can think of a bunch of different events." So I'm hoping that actually we get to do a tabletop gaming night at the winery. I'm trying to. I was like, people will come out for that. They definitely will. I mean, it's a small place anyway. It's not like it's gonna have 200 people. It can only have like 50 people in it anyway. But I've been trying to put together a actually in-person physical board game meeting at the winery, which I think would be a lot of fun. Wild Barley says, all I know about Daggerheart is there are frog people, which is fun. Okay, I didn't even know that. All right, let me take down this, and then I'm going to say here, I'm going to go to the start here. Because we looked at sample characters last time, but I don't remember what the start here was. So I'm not going to look at the sample characters again. It says these materials that we're looking at here are from March 12, 2024. And I re-downloaded this. I went back to their website and I downloaded it just a couple of minutes before we got live. So I'm assuming this is the latest material because I re-downloaded this from their website. I did that just in case there had been something that had been updated since, what was that, 2 weeks ago or something like that? So maybe not. So we were looking at the quick start adventure. It says that's a great place to begin. It's a 3-hour adventure, walk through the core rules, 5 pre-generated characters. Oh, I'm not sure if I'm going to have time to build other things out for RavenCon, but we just because of the way this is going, and I only have 1 week. But this would be fun to be able to do a adventure in here. We'll see what it's like. Hey, Doc Flamingo. Good morning. For GMs, we have a folder just for you. Within it, you can find all the sheets you want as reference cards for character creation, campaign maps to start your adventure, and a folder with every card in the game. If you're playing in person, don't forget to print the action tracker card. For players, there's a folder for each class that contains the print and play materials you'll need to begin making a character. The full rules text can be found in Daggerheart version 1.2 open playtest manuscript. That's what we're going to be looking at today. Okay, so I got version 1.2 playtest right here. Let me put this up on the screen. All right, let's see what this is all about. Oh, now it's up on the screen. Okay, so we're saying Daggerheart open beta playtest. You will find a rough draft of the rulebook that should help you get started. Some important things to keep in mind are the game is still in active development. The rulebook has not gone through an editor yet. The balancing of adversaries is still in the exploratory phase. Hey, Zero the Blade. Good morning. Good morning. The art is all subject to change. We will release new updates periodically during the open beta playtest cycle. And even though we are in beta, you can stream your games. You can make DPGL compliant content for the game. We only ask that you make it clear your project is using the Daggerheart playtest. Let's see if I could make one. It would be fun to do for dinner. Dinner and a board game is kind of taking a back seat because of just the amount of time that I'm spending on everything. But that would have been fun. Okay, change log. No change art yet. All right, table of contents. So what's going to be in this? Introduction. Part 1 is preparing for adventure. Classes, ancestries, community. Part 2 is playing an adventure, core mechanics. So what we might do is go from, we might take a look at a bit of the introduction over here to figure out what this is supposed to be, but then jump over to core mechanics so we understand exactly how to play. Leveling up, equipment, loot, part 3. This looks like game master. There's a lot of material in here. Wow. Game master's guides. Part 5. Okay, so this is a huge document. This is 377 pages. Oh, that sounds like fun. Hiding Easter eggs for the kids. Okay, so let's just see what it says, its introduction, and what this is all supposed to be about, so we get its feel, what type of game this is, because I don't even know. Okay, Daggerheart is a collaborative role-playing game set in a high fantasy world, a place of incredible magic and perilous adventure. During a campaign, you may find yourself rubbing elbows with nobles in an attempt to stop an assassination plot, diving deep into an ancient dungeon to keep a powerful creature from escaping and unleashing its power, sailing across a vast ocean to face off against a terrifying sea monster, or protecting a precious relic from falling into the hands of a dangerous enemy. No matter the adventure your party chooses to embark upon, Daggerheart is designed to provide the tools to tell your story that is both heartfelt and epic. Okay, we know what a tabletop game is, but what kind of role-playing game is Daggerheart? So what are they trying to do? This seems important. Daggerheart is a heroic, narrative-focused experience with combat as a prominent aspect of play, facilitating emotionally engaging, player-driven campaigns that are punctuated by exciting battles and harrowing challenges. The game takes a more rules-light approach to its design, encouraging players and GMs to focus on the story they're telling rather than the complexity of the mechanics. It asks them to act in good faith with one another to tell the best story they can, and looks to provide structure when it's unclear how things might resolve within that story. The system has a free flow approach to combat that avoids stopping the game into stopping down, that might be stepping down. Stopping down the game into rounds, and doesn't rely on grid-based movement for the maps and minis. This is all purposeful in creating a game that utilizes the kind of terrain and map building that miniature-based games are known for, while making Daggerheart streamlined, approachable, and focused on delivering a great narrative experience at the table. So it says it does not rely on grid-based movement. Purpose for that is to create the kind of terrain and map building and miniature-based games, utilizing the kind of terrain and map building that miniature-based games are known for. So does that mean that it's not trying to have you go, I guess, square by square? But if you are building out terrain, you can use that to say, well, I'm generally over here. I'm over here to generally represent the physical situation. Is that what's going on? James says, I don't think you get to clock 400 plus pages and call yourself rules light. Yeah, well, that's a good point. Oh, BGD says marketing doublespeak. Trying to tell you it's the best of both worlds. It says those who prefer a highly strategic, rules-heavy experience with more of a heritage from war games may find that Daggerheart doesn't have all the crunchy bits they're used to. Those who come from the very rules-like gameplay may find some mechanics engage in areas where they're used to a more free-form approach. That's okay. You should always play the types of games that make you and your table happy. That said, if you're looking to tell a heroic fantasy stories with modern approach to mechanics that focuses on both epic battles and the emotional narrative of the characters who fight them, then you've come to the right place. Daggerheart utilizes an asymmetric design. That means it plays very different from the GM than it does for the players. Okay, that's important too. I guess I could get out like a highlighter too. So that's interesting. So we're doing like asymmetric design here. How do I use a highlighter? There we go. Asymmetric design. That means it plays differently for the GM than it does for the players. It seems like I'm seeing this quite a bit now. Different kind of play for the GM than the players, and I don't mind that. I don't mind that. It can be right for the right type of game, which means that it's more gamist, or seems like it would imply that it's more gamist than simulation. When you're doing the simulation approach to gaming, then that doesn't necessarily make sense. That probably doesn't make sense. Everything needs to operate the same way for the PCs and the MTCs. But I'm more okay with that for some gamist approaches. I think that can work well. What kind of experience are you supposed to be delivering to the player? Mike says, how many of the pages are rules versus lore and other things? I didn't think that it seemed like there was a whole lot of lore in here. I don't think it seemed like there was a lot of rules here. How does the rules example balance? I don't know. Yeah, there seems like there's a lot in here. So many tabletop RPGs have some asymmetry, with players each controlling one PC while the GM plays everyone else. Well, okay, yes, I guess that's asymmetry. But Daggerheart's asymmetry goes deeper. Players roll the 2d12 duality dice for their PC's standard actions, including their attacks. At the same time, the GM makes moves without rolling for most actions, but rolls a d20 when making attacks for adversaries. Each PC gains hope when they roll with hope, and the GM gains fear when the PCs roll with fear. PCs and adversaries both have a mechanic called experiences, but they are used in different ways at different times. This asymmetrical design is intended to help all participants more effectively contribute to creating a memorable experience together at the table. This is also something that we're seeing a lot more now here. Daggerheart gleans inspiration from a variety of sources. Below is an abridged list of media the design team drew upon when creating this game. List of tabletop RPGs, a list of books. A Wizard of Earthsea is in here. So is The Dragon Prince, Lord of the Rings, Witcher, of course, The Legend of Vox Machina. Special Appreciation, Cypher, Genesis System. Okay, I think we should look at heart of the game, most important rule. Okay, before we jump to the mechanics. So what does it say? The heart of the game. That way we do understand what they're trying to do when we look at their mechanics. In Daggerheart, you'll take turns speaking at the table, describing what your characters do and the consequences of those actions and how the narrative evolves because of those consequences. When the rules call for it, or when a situation seems like it needs it, you'll roll the dice to see what happens next. Depending on the result of those dice, the dynamics of the conversation will change. The dice players use in Daggerheart generally come in two different categories, your duality dice and your damage dice. Your duality dice are the two 12-sided dice referred to as D12s that are of different colors, one representing hope and the other representing fear. These embody the fate of the world around you and its effect on your success. Your damage dice correspond to the weapon or spell you're wielding and expresses how deadly or a successful attack you might make it be. Anytime you're making a roll to see whether you succeed or fail at something, you'll roll your duality dice and take the sum of their results plus any modifiers you have that apply to the action. If the total is equal to or higher than the difficulty set by the GM, it's a success. So we talked about dice mechanics and all of that. We'll get back to that when we're talking about more game design. So we're going to have a 2d12 bell curve here. If that total is equal to or higher than the difficulty set by the GM, it's a success. If it's lower, it's a failure. You'll also tell the GM whether your hope or fear. I just had a thought here. Talking about asymmetry and or the bell curve when we're talking about dice distribution. We've talked about that quite a bit. What we haven't ever talked about is bell distribution, normal distribution, bell curve on the difficulty numbers. Those are always, or seem like they're all, 10, 15, 20, 25, or 5, 10, 15, 25. But how many different tasks should you be accomplishing? What if you actually put the difficulty on a bell curve? Would that make sense? And that could also tell you the quantity of checks you'll be making at different difficulties. Like how rare is it to make it a very difficult check or something like that? I don't know. I have to think more about that. I don't know why that all of a sudden popped into my mind. BGD says asymmetrical design is another marketing buzz phrase, especially explicitly encapsulating what is implicitly traditional role-playing architecture. Rules for the old school GM have never been the same. Diverging in dice math or other mechanics is just one possible iteration of that philosophy. We talked about, like when we're talking about, I'll use the phrase asymmetrical play in a board game if all the players are different, yet supposedly balanced. Like, if you're talking about, like Twilight Imperium or something, that to me, that would be an asymmetrical game because every player is not starting off exactly the same. Whereas Dominion would be more of a symmetrical game, because every player is the same. Like we intentionally designed Enchantress that way, that we've got different players. But I think you're right here that like when we're talking about looking back at the old school game, I guess it depends on how far you want to take it too. The rules for the players and rules for the game master are different. I'm thinking about something like GURPS or Roll Master. Probably Middle Earth role-playing game where I mean, yes, there's asymmetry. Like, I wasn't even thinking on this level when it talks about right here. Well, it's asymmetrical because the players are playing an individual person and the game master is running the world. Well, yes, I know. I guess I was thinking about how do players resolve actions versus how do NPCs resolve actions? Are you supposed to be do you roll on the same tables? Are you making the same types of rolls? If the player has a +4 to combat, if the bad guy has a +4 to combat, are they both the same? In GURPS, that's true. They would be the same. You would resolve the NPCs the same way you would resolve the PCs. Whereas when we were talking about Fated Edge adventure system and things like that, that potentially you do have heroes and monsters that just have different rules in order to invoke a certain gameplay. Like, for instance, maybe monster dice never explode, like we're talking about. Lynn says, I think the difficulty classes should be calibrated to the bell curve, but it's complicated once the player's skill begins to shift the bell curve. Yeah, I wonder, you probably don't want to, you might not want to do both. I'm going to have to think more about that. Doc Flamingo says, Dune board game. Well, right. Well, we try to do that. I mean, that's exactly what we were trying to work with in Fated Edge. Because I think the elephant in the room is that nobody seems to ask the question, is difficult for whom? Because we talked about whether or not difficulty is a feature of the world or if it's something, is difficulty relative? And I was trying to work with things saying the difficulty of a task is a feature of the world. This is a difficult wall to climb. That means it's a feature of the world. It's not difficult for the wizard. But you could do it that way. You could reverse that. Okay, so let's see over here. If it's lower, it's a failure. You'll also tell the GM whether your hope or fear die rolled higher, and the situation around you changes based on the result. We'll discuss this more in depth in the core mechanics section in part 2. Each game of Daggerheart is called a session, and those sessions are typically a small story that makes up a part of a larger narrative that plays out over multiple sessions known as a campaign. Sometimes in long campaigns, you may also run arcs, multiple sessions that happen within the same campaign, but that put their focus on a specific area of the narrative within it. Many groups enjoy playing open-ended campaigns that last a few months, and sometimes even years, getting together every week or two to continue their character stories indefinitely. But you may also choose to designate a certain number of sessions for a campaign and play the game to a predetermined conclusion. Your group may decide you want to play 10 sessions or 20 sessions with those characters before making new ones. Or you may decide you only want to play a session and see how things go. All of these options are wonderful ways to play. Do whatever works best for your group. There is no winning or losing in Daggerheart in the traditional gaming sense. The experience is a collaborative storytelling effort between everyone at the table. The characters may not always get what they want or achieve their goals the first time around. They may make big mistakes or even die along the way, but there's no winning or losing conditions for the game. If a character dies, the party may seek out a way to bring them back to life, or that player may instead make a new character the party meets along on their journey. If the group fails to stop the villain from enacting their plan, perhaps the party must face the consequences of that failure and try to make it right. If they succeed, they may have angered or emboldened an even stronger enemy who appears to retaliate. If you're working together to craft a narrative that's fun and exciting for everyone, then you've already won. Okay, that was basic GM kind of stuff. The most important rule of Daggerheart is that you make the game your own. The rules included in this manuscript are designed to help you have an enjoyable experience at the table, but they should never get in the way of a story you want to tell, characters you want to play, or adventures you want to have. As long as your table agrees, everything can be adjusted to your group's playstyle. There's no rule if there's a rule you'd rather ignore or a modification that works better for you, feel free to implement it with your table's consent. Okay. Doc Flamingo says, to me, asymmetrical would imply one side is highly disadvantaged in some sense, and so had to rely on tactics to compete. Well, that could be too. So what exactly it means to run an asymmetrical game, that word doesn't invoke the same meaning to everyone. Len says, I tend to prefer a conception of difficulty as absolute, and different characters have different competencies. Doc Flamingo says, a lot of this is very generic and seems to be nothing more than filler. After Candela Obscura, this makes me wonder if there's actually a game in here. We did look at Candela Obscura. And I think I was confused about what that was at the moment when we went through that. We went through Candela Obscura because I thought that was the game that they were creating, that Critical Role was creating. But it's this. This is Daggerheart. I mean, they did Candela Obscura too. But this is going to be their new game that replaces Dungeons and Dragons. That's right. Is that right? Mike M says adjusting RPGs as a playing group is how tabletops have always been played for a long time. Yes, I know most people who do that already know that as well. Let's see here. It says player principles: be a fan of your character and their journey, spotlight your allies, play to find out what happens, address the characters and address the players. Hold on gently. What does that mean? Improvisational storytelling isn't always perfect, and that's okay. Hold on gently to the fiction enough that you don't lose the pieces that matter, but not so tightly the narrative has no room to breathe. Make mistakes and make changes. Build the world together. Every participant is a storyteller, not just the GM. Daggerheart is a very collaborative game, perhaps more so than other games, and reaches its greatest potential when every player, PC or GM, is working together. Okay. So this game, I guess this is important to know too, that this game is not a generic game. It seems like it's coming with a setting. The world you explore in Daggerheart will typically be one of great magic, wondrous landscapes, mythical beasts, and powerful foes. It seems like, so the core realms, the mortal realm, the Hallows realms, that's the circles below, the realms beyond. So it does seem like there is world building in here. Okay. Wild Barley says, I think difficulty classes should be totally arbitrary by a GM, DM, and contingent upon circumstances at hand, people's skills, experience, environment, awareness, etc. What happened with it? I have no idea what happened with Candela Obscura. What is this? World play on a 38 special? I'm not sure what that means. So we got a different approach there, it seems like. Okay, so let's we got tokens, game cards. Let's go to the actual mechanics here. Oh, it does say optional maps and miniatures. Using maps and miniatures to represent the scenarios and the players are facing, especially during battle, can help to illustrate the scene rather than relying solely on the theater of the mind. When drawing or building a map, scale, distance, and details are not always going to be perfectly accurate, and that's okay. The map and miniatures should never limit your imagination, only provide extra spatial context so that everyone can picture the scene clearly. Okay, so that is what that means. That get your miniatures out, get your terrain out for a general representation of the physical situation, if you would like to. All right, let's skip preparing for adventure. Let's go to playing an adventure. Because I think, okay, core mechanics. Yeah, this is where I wanted to go to. Hold on loosely, but don't let go. Okay, thank you. So the core mechanics, it says, this section covers the core mechanics of Daggerheart and how to utilize them as a player at the table. However, part 1 contains rules for using your domain cards, classes, subclass, ancestry, and community, and the equipment section near the end of part 2 represents rules for different types of weapons and armor. Duality dice. The core dice in Daggerheart are a pair of 2d12s called the duality dice. These d12s are different colors, one representing hope and the other representing fear. Each player chooses 2 colors of dice that embody those concepts for them, using them anytime they make an action roll during the game. Your duality dice don't need to be the same 2 colors as anyone else's around the table, but they do need to be easily recognizable for each other at the game. Okay, here is an example here about picking different color dice. One person wants to yellow and blue or something, and the other person wants orange and something else. The duality dice represent the way the world pushes the character back or guides them forward throughout the story. Regardless of whether you succeed or fail in an action roll, your duality roll influence how the scene evolves. Rolling hope and fear. Hope and fear represent the duality of the world beyond the characters, and how the world around them impacts the action they're attempting. One of your duality dice is your hope die, and the other is your fear die. Hope. When you roll your duality die and hope die rolls higher than the fear die, you roll with hope. When this happens, mark one of the hope slots on your character sheet up to a maximum of 5. You might also gain hope from spells, abilities, and other things that happen in the game. Fear. When you roll your duality dice and the fear die rolls higher than the hope die, you roll with fear. When this happens, if you succeed on your action roll, there are consequences. Even if you succeed on your action roll, there are consequences or complications from it. Mike says, hold on loosely has been part of the GM and player advice since some Powered by the Apocalypse games and other similar games for a bit now. I think it comes from an improv theater rather than the song, but I'm not sure. I don't know for sure. I haven't seen that before. I don't know if we've come across that on the morning grind, the hold on loosely phrase. It says critical success. Whenever you make a duality roll, if both dice roll the same number, you automatically roll a critical success, even if you would have failed because the total is lower than your difficulty number. This also counts as a roll with hope, but not only do you gain hope, you also clear a stress. Using hope. Once you've gained hope and recorded it on your character sheet, you can spend it to power special abilities, erasing it from your character sheet when you do. You can only hold up to 5 hope at any given time, so you don't want to save it for too long. Hope can be used in several ways: to help an ally, to utilize an experience, or to activate a hope feature. To help an ally. You can spend 1 hope to help an ally who is making an action you could feasibly aid them. Oh, somebody's got some numbers here. So I was waiting for that. Actually, it is Lynn, of course. Lynn says, I see that critical successes happen more often in Daggerheart, 8.3% as opposed to 5% on D20 in D&D. So good to know from our game design mechanics perspective. So 8.3% chance of critical success. Okay, you can only spend hope to aid an ally who is making an action where you could feasibly aid them. When you do this, describe how you're helping and roll a d6 advantage die. They can add the result to their action roll. If more than one PC wants to help an ally, each spends a hope die to roll a d6 advantage die. The highest result among those advantage dice is added to the roll. As long as it's less than 10%. Oh, it's important. Less than 10% critical success. James says, hyper minor nitpick that's almost not worth mentioning. They should have called the fear die the despair die. Despair is the opposite of hope, not fear. And while despair sounds like a severe word, it isn't. Sure, you can despair that an entire city of people have been wiped off the map in a cataclysmic magical event, but you can also despair that you didn't study well enough for the test. I like that. Because that yeah, I actually like that too. Because that's also implying like the emotion that the character has when they're making this test. Are they rolling that they have hope or despair? Yeah, I like that. I like that. I don't think that's too minor. I like that phraseology better. Wild Barley says it's going to look kind of silly when one person uses a yellow die for hope and the next player has a yellow die for their fear die, LOL. Good luck to the colorblind, too. Well, yeah, it seems like well, I guess they're not packaging. I mean, I can see why they said that, because it doesn't seem like they're packaging D12s. Like, I'm guessing this is going to be put out as a book and not, I mean, there might be a box set later, but it looks like this is going to be put out as a book. And so telling people you just need 2 different color dice rather than making sure that everybody, you've got to use blue and black or light blue and black or red and green or something like that. Pick your favorite colors. And as long as you know what they mean, then you're good. Yeah, there may be different number styles. It could do that. Oh, Wild Barley's also backing up James. Yeah. So I agree. Oh, and RPG Exile as well. So yeah, no, I think that's right. I like that, James. We need to submit that someplace. Despair also has the alliteration thing. Oh, alliteration thing going for it. They keep bringing up duality. Despair is the duality, not fear. Hope and despair even rolls off the tongue better. Fear leads to anger. Hope and fear. But Access Inner Light says hope and fear have always been juxtaposed. Okay, great old one talking about hang on loosely, or was it old on loosely says it seems like as improv is, it seems as improv is where the expression came from. So naturally actors would pick up on it. Ah, yeah, okay. So if it came from the improv idea, the critical role is obviously bringing that into Dungeons and Dragons. Yes, yes. Makes sense. So you can help an ally with hope. You could see that would see those two would also seem to go better to me. Hope, fear and courage, hope and despair. I don't know what type of game this is, but fear and courage would go well. When I think of hope and despair, that actually sounds like the Lord of the Rings to me. That seems like that would be very Lord of the Rings themed to me. Hope and despair. That kind of thing comes up in the One Ring RPG, which also we need to build out. I'm running completely out of time. I thought I was busy before. I got to cut the grass this afternoon too. So many things to do. Got to get back turned around here. Let's see. So helping out, utilize an experience. You can spend a hope to utilize one of your relevant experiences on an action roll, adding its modifiers to the dice results. If more than one experience could apply, you can spend an additional hope for each experience you want to add to your result. I don't really understand that. You can spend hope to utilize one of your relevant experiences. I suppose we'll get to that later on an action roll, adding its modifier. That sounds like, hey, this should apply. Maybe that's like an aspect in Fate. Like, hey, I've got this experience on my sheet that could help me out here. I can use a hope to add its modifier. Activate a hope feature. Spells and abilities may also allow or require you to spend hope to activate certain effects. A hope feature is any effect that asks you to spend hope to activate it. If the text instructs you to spend hope, that means you must immediately spend that specified number of hope, or you can't trigger the hope feature. Okay. When using a hope feature, if you've already rolled with hope as the higher duality die for that action, you can just spend the hope from that die instead of erasing a hope from your character sheet. Otherwise, you'll need to spend hope you've stored from earlier rolls to activate that effect. Unless an effect states otherwise, you can't spend hope multiple times on the same spell or ability to increase or repeat its effects. For example, if a feature says you can spend a hope to add 1d6 to damage roll, you can't spend 2 hope and add 2d6 to the damage roll. Tip: some events only trigger on a success with hope. This doesn't mean you can spend hope on a successful roll with fear to get the effect limit. Some effects only trigger on a success with hope. Okay. That doesn't mean you can spend hope on a successful roll with fear to get the effect. It instead means the effect only takes place when you roll with hope and you succeed on your action roll. On this kind of effect, you don't have to spend hope to activate it. It just happens as long as the conditions of the roll are met. Can you spend hope to find an inn with excellent ale and no bed bugs? Yeah. I've got to cut my grass and see how long the walk is. But the walk, I walked the first. We got two basically separate groups of vines, and it's a 1.7 mile walk to go all the way through the vineyards. I'm gonna do that, and that's probably gonna be about that to cut my grass. Ryan says this does not seem to be rules light. I'm kind of agreeing with you, Ryan. If you told me, I mean, again, I guess that's the kind of thing that, I mean, it can certainly be more. It can certainly be crunchier. It can certainly be crunchier. But the way this is, the way this part of this is going, I don't know that if I would have said this is a rules light game. James says, I said it last week too, but there's a lot of resource tracking contained here and a lot of technicality in spending them. This indicates the game isn't rules light, at least in resourcing. I mean, like I said, it doesn't seem like it's not Roll Master here, but there is a lot in here. Inner Light says, yeah, I wouldn't call this rules light either. Buy this axe is rules light. So, what were we saying? Okay, so that was using fear. As a player, rolling with fear means your action doesn't mean your action roll has failed, but you'll face some type of complication. For example, you might only learn partial information, face a strike from the enemy you just attacked, or encounter an unexpected danger. I hope this is something that, personally, I hope this is more mechanical rather than leaving it up to the game master. We will see. Lynn says, I wonder if the authors were thinking of rules light as meaning no formal combat rounds or grid movement. Maybe. Inner Light says there are a lot of OSR games that are rules light. Because you can get into a lot of, when you're talking about movement, like a lot of movement rules. Like in a war game, some of the most complicated rules are often the actual rules that govern movement of forces. And that can be the same way in some really grid-based RPGs. James says, I mean, I'm totally fine with heavy rules. Just don't call it what it isn't, It doesn't generate trust in knowing what you're building. BGD says, the core dice mechanic seems to be designed to be intentionally convoluted, perhaps intended to foil players' quick calculations of probability in the moment, which I think sucks. Yeah. I'll think about that. I'll see how fear works here. I mean, but in a general sense, okay, 2d12, with some type of modifier, which die rolls higher means something. Okay. But Mike says, I'm trying to give their argument charity. Do they mean rules light in the sense that it's not simulationist? I mean, maybe. But you can still have gamist. This is a more gamist approach than simulationist approach. But maybe that was maybe that was what they were trying to communicate. Okay, so as a player, rolling with fear doesn't mean your action roll failed, but you'll face some type of complication. For example, you might only learn partial information, face a strike from the enemy you just attacked, or encounter an unexpected danger. If you fail on the action roll when you rolled fear, you'll instead face major consequences or complications. When you roll with fear, you don't record it on your character sheet. Instead, the GM not only determines which complications result from your fear roll, but they also collect fear. The GM can later spend this fear on effects, such as powering adversary and environmental moves. See fear in part 3. So it does say, that does seem like the game master is going to determine what happens because you rolled with fear. Oh, I rolled with fear. There's some kind of complication. Wild Barley says it's not rules light. It's a rules heavy reformulation of Powered by the Apocalypse. To be expression distinct, I suppose. James says, great observation to Wild Barley. Lynn says, I think a good die mechanic is one that has you roll once, take a total, and maybe add a modifier. Anything beyond that will bog down. Yeah, I mean, I do think about that too. Because it's very easy to sit here and design all kinds of things. But then what have you got to do at the table? Particularly also depending how many times you're going to roll. I mean, I don't know. I'm not against it at the moment. BGD says, if I'm getting this mechanic correctly, an unmodified, no bonus player roll starts with a 50-50 chance of rolling with hope versus rolling with fear, and the average roll will be a 13. So, right, it does seem 50-50. I mean, assuming I understand. I guess, well, no, it's actually not quite 50-50 because it did say in here that if you roll doubles, because I was like, is hope higher or fear higher? But hope and fear can be tied. That's what causes a critical success, and it said that's done with hope. So it is a little bit easier to roll with hope than it is to roll with fear. So you've got a little bit of an edge. And an 8.333 chance of success, automatic, because if you roll doubles, it's a critical success regardless. But yeah, it seems like it's going to be swingy. Yeah, I mean 8.3 chance on the other side. You're supposed to add the 2d12. I believe we're adding the 2d12. We're summing these things, right? It says that up here. Well, we said that someplace. So you add them together to figure out whether or not you succeeded or not. But the one that's higher is whether or not with its hope or if it's fear. As I have not read anything about a critical failure yet. It didn't say anything. So far, I haven't seen anything about critical failure. Okay, damage thresholds and hit points. Hit points represent the physical injuries and discomforts experienced by a player character during their adventures. Your available hit points, sometimes called 8. So, okay, wait, here we go. Lynn says 8.33% chance of a tie, 45.83 chance of rolling either hope or fear. So that should mean that 45.83 plus 45.83 plus 8.33. Yeah, that gets us there. So it's that means it's a total of 54.16. 54.16% chance of rolling with hope when you include the critical success. So that's still pretty 50-50. That's pretty close to 50-50. Basically 54 46. You think BGD says this game seems very easy button so as not to hurt the player's feelings? Really? I'm not sure. So I'm not sure what we can do to. I mean, that wouldn't surprise me, given an improv style kind of game here. Wild Barley says, as an experienced DM, I will pre-roll my creature rolls round by round for entire encounters. If I know the set piece is going to be so complicated as snail, like purely from dice rolling volume. Like have numbers going down a sheet. That's the disadvantage of having, hold on. My Dropbox may have started syncing. So if the stream quality went down for a moment, it'll return in just a second. But yeah, so yes, yeah. Wild Barley says, yep. In fact, I've thought about that even having like a, I mean, the computer makes that really easy to generate now. Go to random.org and just have a sheet of numbers. In fact, I did also think this might be a dumb idea, but I was thinking about that in terms of if you were trying to do like a competition for like a dungeon raid or something, you have different groups all go through the same dungeon. That what if you gave everybody the same random numbers? So if you had a table, so instead of and so like the game master would have to have the random numbers. So whenever you do an action, everybody you get the next random number on that, and that would be consistent across all tables. So if you were actually trying to do some type of competition or something, you wouldn't say, well, this table happened to roll a lot better. Or, at critical moments, these guys got through it or found this kind of treasure or defeated this monster because they just happened to roll very well. Now that the numbers are going to be used in different circumstances. One player decides to do, action A before action B or whatever, but then every group would have the same numbers to work with. Probably unnecessary in most circumstances, but could be in like a competition setting. Lynn says, is agreeing with Wild Barley. Our DM did that as an experiment last week, and it really sped up combat with a lot of monsters. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, the being so easy to have that list of numbers, it seems like that should be something that I wonder why we don't see that more. Every game master having a table And when you need a number, you just take the next number. Wild Barley says, I'll let you know one of my DM wizardry secrets. Pre-rolling and prefixing dice are my sauce for being adept at running simultaneous split party encounters that feel like TV scenes. Oh, fun. Lynn says, pre-generating numbers for player roles takes away a sense of agency. Possibly. Yes. I mean, it may not be a good idea. The trouble is that how and when pre-generated numbers come up would have just as big an effect as the randomly generating them. Right. That would be your agency right there. What actions you're taking, in what order, what you're actually doing. That matters. Because that's something the players are actually choosing. That's your player's agency. It's giving everybody the same forces of the universe, but like utterly not necessarily if you're just playing one game. Damage thresholds and hit points. Hit points represent the physical injuries and discomforts experienced by a character during their adventures. Your available hit points, sometimes called HP, are determined by your class. When you take damage, you mark between 1 and 3 HP, representing you've lost that much health. However, each class also has a certain damage threshold, indicating how much damage you can endure before marking a hit point. The dark bars on the hit points and stress section of your character sheet show the 3 tiers of damage you can take: severe, major, and minor. Okay, let's take a look at this example here. A level 1 guardian starts with the following thresholds and hit points. Start at minor 6, major 11, and severe 16. Okay, that's what we've got here. Hit points and stress. Arrow going to the left. HP down here and stress down here. Okay, so we're going to take between 1 and 3 HP. However, each class has a certain damage threshold, indicating how much damage you can endure before marking a hit point. Oh, okay. So if you take a severe hit, you got to mark 3 hit points down here. I guess that's what it's saying here. So I guess if there's less than 5 damage, I'm guessing at the moment, then you would not take any hit points. If you cross this 6, it looks like you're marking 1. If you cross this 11, you're marking 2. And if you cross this 16, you're marking 3. I guess it's the way we go. I don't know how stress works. We will see how this goes. Oh, yeah, it is. I guess here. When the GM tells you to take damage, compare that number to your thresholds and mark hit points depending on the tier. Severe damage marks 3. Major marks 2. Minor rolls 1. Damage below minor marks 1 stress. Okay, so that's what stress is. Damage below minor marks 1 stress, but no HP. Damage of 0 or below marks no HP or stress. Wild Barley says, I have decision trees for complex monsters. The orc less so. Now, I would not. Now, if I were doing that, the players would not see the rolls. It's not like the players would know what number is coming up next. Wild Barley says, I'm super pro agency and rule of cool. Ask Heath. I never say no, but expecting some math shortcutting in the trade is reasonable. Lynn says, this looks like more bookkeeping than a flat HP system. If you ever mark your final available hit point, you must immediately make a death move. See death. In the example above, the Guardian's incoming damage is severe if it's 16 or higher, and they mark 3 or 6. Okay, so it's equal to or higher than. If the damage is 11 or higher, but below 16, the damage is major, and they mark 2. If damage below 6, they don't take any damage and instead mark a single point of stress. Clearing hit points. Anytime you take, see, I am, James says, I do not like this method of HP accounting. I am for this idea of like minor, major, severe wounds. I would like to be able to have that in a system. I would like to have, so I will probably see that come up in Faded Edge. I know we've talked about that before briefly, a minor, major, or severe wound. But here it looks like we've got 2 different levels here, or maybe 3 if you're including stress. So we're using this idea of minor, major, or severe damage, but then we're just going to hit points after that. Wild Barley says it reminds me of exhaustion levels with a different name. It could. I don't remember that enough. James says, I agree that non-lethal combat is important, but there are better ways to implement this. Inner Light says, yeah, there's a way to get past the low hit points at a first level system, but this isn't it. I've been using a system where characters' constitution score is their actual hit points, and then using rolled hit points for battle stress. Lynn says, I like the idea of a smaller number of health states matched with a smaller number of wound severities. Mike says, this doesn't seem all that hard. You either take 1 stress or 1, 2, or 3 HP, depending on the threshold achieved. Yeah, so we had damage dice. So this is going to change. This is going to be changed based on your class. So if you're the wizard, you're expecting lower thresholds. If you're the fighter, you're going to have higher thresholds. We probably could. We'll probably end up talking about that during game design, Lynn. Lynn says we could probably do an entire morning grind just on the topic of hit points and alternative systems. I did some videos, just some ordinary videos on hit points. Brancolonia by Archon Publishing created a non-lethal combat system for 5e to be used for bar brawling. No one dies. Clear winners are established. It's a good and fun system. This is a headache. Okay, clearing hit points. Anytime you take downtime action, see downtime, you have the opportunity to clear some of your hit points and stress. Additionally, you level up your character. You'll be able to permanently increase both your damage thresholds as well as the amount of hit points and stress you can take, making your character more resilient against incoming attacks. Optional rule, additional damage threshold. To make the game more dangerous, the table may implement a rule that if the incoming damage on an attack roll is ever double or more of the character's severe threshold, the target marks an additional hit point. This would mean, using the example above, an attack of 32 damage or more would deal 4 hit points to the Guardian. Yes, I know you do, Wild Barley. Unpopular opinion, but Wild Barley likes this. The unpopular opinion, but I like the D20 Star Wars Vitality Wound system. And of course, in one of the Unearthed Arcana, that was the Vitality Wound system was able to be brought back to D&D. That was in 3rd edition, I remember. But I remember playing the Star Wars with Vitality and Wounds. James says you should be able to turn non-lethal combat on and off. Having hits flip-flop on their own feels really bad. Is that what's going on here in this? Yeah, I think we did. We may have. Interlight says, I think we talked about that quite a bit after you created some characters for Shadow Dark. Warhammer Fantasy Role-Playing also had a wound system that could be massaged, maybe a bit more than massaged to account for non-lethal combat. I don't remember that one, but we've looked at it. I remember it seeming like it was fun. Okay, so let's see what stress is. Stress represents the mental and physical strain put on your character during their adventure. You can sometimes spend stress to affect the narrative. When you do, consider the burden your character knowingly accepts. Does your anxiety increase as you use a new tactic in a high-stakes negotiation? Do you accept the impact of witnessing horrors in order to dive back into danger and save the innocent? Are you willing to take minor abrasions to fatally wound your foe? As with hit points, when you take downtime actions, you have the opportunity to clear some of your stress. Additionally, when you gain levels, you'll be able to increase the amount of stress you can withstand. Stress from damage. Hits flip-flopping seems to me like this is what this is doing, but I might be misunderstanding something, and I could admit negativity bias. I could be entirely wrong on my interpretation. I didn't get that this was about non-lethal combat. Let's see, stress. You always mark stress when you take damage that's below your minor threshold but above 0. This reflects the impact on your stamina, both physically and psychologically, as you weather the blows, fight to stay on your feet, or maneuver treacherous situations. If you ever can't mark a stress slot because your slots are already full, you must instead mark 1 hit point. Stress from complications. In addition to marking stress when you take tiny amounts of damage, your GM may also inflict stress as the complication for consequences of an action, especially when a roll doesn't go as well as it could have. For example, you might mark stress when complications result from having a difficult conversation, clashing swords with a worthy foe, or committing an act of incredible bravery. The GM might also give you the option of marking stress to avoid an outcome. Stress from moves. So the use of the term moves here, is that what people are picking up on? It's like powered by the apocalypse. What kind of move are you taking? You might be able to mark stress to perform certain moves that call for it. Unless otherwise noted, you can't spend more than 1 stress to apply an effect more than once on a move. For example, if an ability lets you spend stress to add 1d8 to a damage roll, you can't spend 3 stress and add 3d8 instead. They cannot use any move that requires them to mark stress if they don't have a stress mark. If a player is ever required to mark stress and their stress slots are full, they must instead mark a hit point. You can't use an effect that costs stress if you don't have any stress available to mark. It's totally 5e exhaustion levels? I'm trying to remember the 5e exhaustion levels. Is that where we're going? We'll see. Lynn says, yeah, I'm totally not loving the complexity I'm seeing here. Okay, so action rolls. In each scene, GMs and players go back and forth describing what happens. When you describe an action your character is performing where the outcome is in question, if both the success and failure of the action is interesting to the story, the GM usually calls for an action roll to determine how that moment unfolds. However, if an action would either be impossible to perform or it's easy enough to pull off without a complication, there is no need to roll. It's staged impairment. Yeah, staged impairment till 5th level exhaustion, and then you die. Is that the kind of effect that we're going to have with taking these hit points? Let's see. So the action roll. So you make an action roll. You do so by rolling your 2 duality dice. These 12 dice embody the way the world's chance, luck, and fate play part in your story. Each action roll follows 4 basic steps, which are detailed later in this section. 1. Pick a character trait. Ask the GM what character trait best applies to the roll, and then set a difficulty for the roll, either openly or privately at their discretion based on the details of the scene. Add extra dice and modifiers. Decide if any experience or other modifiers apply, and grab any character tokens, advantage, disadvantage dice, and other dice as needed. Roll the dice. Roll your duality dice, any additional dice. So we're rolling other dice as well. We already knew we were rolling some additional dice, like when somebody was helping somebody, that was a d6. And your character tokens. Roll your character tokens. Total the result, telling the GM the total and which duality die rolled higher. I got a 15 with fear. Resolve the situation. Work together to resolve the outcome of your action. Does Daggerheart, Len asked, does Daggerheart have any skills, or is everything run off the value of a character trait? That didn't say anything about skills. It did say experience here. So experience could be like skills. Decide if any experience or other modifiers apply. Okay, so we got to pick a trait. We got a section called trait rolls. Sometimes more than one trait makes sense. In this case, the GM might ask you which trait fits best, give you a choice between 2, or make a judgment call based on the situation at hand. As you tell him about the important message you have for the king, I need you to make a roll here to determine whether he can tell you're lying or not. I'd say instinct is probably what applies. Does that sound right to you? Unless the move you're making requires a certain trait, feel free to suggest one and describe why it's a good match for what you're doing. However, the GM has the final say over what trait applies. So this is kind of half and half, strikes me. You know, I've kind of been an advocate that one certain, of course, I was calling them abilities, but whatever, your scores This type of action is always governed by this one. This type of action is always governed by this one. In other games, it's more flexible. So this is going with more flexibility. And we've talked about the advantages and disadvantages of those on the show. Roll difficulty. When you decide to make an action roll, the GM always sets a difficulty, the number you need to reach when you roll. This number is based on the situation and how effective your approach might be. I would like a table number on difficulties. Even if they don't tell you the difficulty, they should make any potential consequences of your action clear, unless the consequences aren't something your character would reasonably be aware of. For example, you're putting yourself in melee with this guy. You might take a hit in return. Okay, or if you jump this pit, you might not be able to make it to the other side. If you fail this jump, you might not be able to make it to the other side. Okay, figure out what dice modifiers apply. Okay, so here's our list here. Duality dice. You roll your hope and fear die with every action roll. Advantage and disadvantage. If you have advantage or disadvantage on the roll, set aside that D6 for your roll. Especially if you're rolling with disadvantage, make sure your disadvantage die is a distinct color so you can remember which die to subtract from the result. Okay, so advantage and disadvantage are going to be D6s. Class feature, subclass cards, and domain cards. Some class features allow you to add extra dice to your roll. So we are kind of, it sounds like we're building a dice pool here. So our core dice are the hope and fear. We're going to be building some kind of pool here. For example, a bard can give you a rally die, which you can add to any action, reaction, or damage die of your choice. Similarly, some of your subclass and domain cards might grant you a bonus die. Set those aside for your roll. Other dice. Occasionally, other effects might give an extra die. Then count the modifiers that apply to your action roll, setting aside that many character tokens to help you keep track. See counting character tokens below. Modifiers can include the following. Chosen trait. Add the modifier for whichever trait you and your GM chose for this roll. I was wondering why I was asking character tokens. I was wondering if the character tokens were like double-sided. They were like D2s or something like that. But it sounds like the character tokens are here to help remind you what other bonuses there are. Experience. If you have an experience or several you think applies to the situation, describe how your experience helps your chance of success and then spend 1 hope per experience to add its modifier to your roll. The GM may ask you for more information to justify that experience, but you have final say within reason over whether or not your experience applies. Now, that's interesting. So the player has final say within reason, of course, over whether your experience applies. Feature classes, subclass cards, and domain cards. Sometimes these grant you a modifier to your roll, so keep an eye out. Other bonuses or penalties. Add other bonuses or penalties, such as from the GM, other items you've equipped, and other sources. Tip. If you consistently use the same experience on every roll, it's very likely the GM will require you to narrow the scope of your experience or change it altogether. And that, to me, that's what I was thinking. So that sounds like our fate accelerated approaches, right? We talked about that a lot when we were talking about fate accelerated different approaches and what happens when somebody's trying to use the same approach over and over and over again. Some people are fine with that. Other people are like, no, you can't do that. So if you hear, especially since it's generally within the player's purview whether or not an experience applies, if you're using it over and over and over again, you're going to need to narrow the scope. The purpose of an experience is to reflect the way your character is specialized in something important. So maybe that is like skills. The purpose of an experience is to reflect the way a character is specialized in something important, not give you a bonus to all rolls. You're right. What if my experience is winning? Can't I apply that to anything? Well, I think that, yeah. So I think you would need to narrow that. Okay, counting character tokens. When you declare what modifiers you're applying to your action roll, grab that many character tokens. See what you need to play in the introduction. Tokens are never rolled for a random value. They are simply +1 counters you add to your hand to aid in counting your results. Before adding them to a roll, figure out the sum of all your modifiers, then take that many tokens. For example, if you have a -1 to agility and a +2 modifier for an experience you're utilizing, you have a +1 total modifier for the roll, so set aside 1 token to represent that. Tip. Sometimes your total modifier in a roll might be negative. In that case, you can still use tokens, but remember they'll signify the number you need to subtract from the results, not add. Roll the dice. Once you've gathered all your dice and tokens from step 2, roll them all at the same time. Counting each token as 1, add all your tokens and dice rolls together, keeping an eye out for numbers you need to subtract, such as your disadvantage die. Then tell the GM the total number you rolled along with the duality die, whether or not the duality rolled higher. I rolled a 15 with fear. Tip: when an effect lets you choose whether or not to add dice to an action roll, such as choosing the Bard's rally die, you must roll them at the same time as your other dice rather than waiting to see the numbers on the other die. That does seem like a lot. Yeah, I would not say that's a rules light way to adjudicate this. I mean, that is a lot. That is a lot to try to get together to resolve an action. I'm interested to see how it plays. But because it does seem light. Like if I got to do all of that to swing a sword in an orc, am I swinging a sword in an orc? It also depends on what I'm resolving. Am I resolving the entire fight with the orc, or am I resolving one sword swing with the orc? Right? Lynn says this whole procedure does seem a bit baroque. If it's capitalized, it's probably referring to something specific. Probably so. You're talking about like agility here. So resolve the situation. Each time you make an action roll, the scene changes in some way. The GM describes how the world reacts to the action that's been taken, but depending on what your action result is, the situation changes differently. If your total meets or exceeds the difficulty set by the GM, the action succeeds. You get what you want. If the total is below the difficulty, the action fails. You don't get what you want. But with one exception. As described in the duality dice section, if your duality dice both roll the same number, you've rolled a critical success, even if your total wasn't enough to meet the difficulty. So that's always go. You're an always go on critical success. So that's like, so that strikes me. Is that the answer to the question we were talking about when we're like, I want to shoot the dragon. I use that as an example. With I'm the Hobbit. I want to shoot the dragon with my short bow. Can I please roll to see if I can put the arrow through his eye and kill him? Like, what's your answer to that? I don't know, because we don't really know what critical success means. It says you get what you want. See, right? See, I guess my main, I mean, you know, the system is not the most important thing. It's the people you're playing with and the story that you're telling. But it seems like we are getting what is an action? You get what you want. It seems like my main comment right now would be, it seems like we're going through a lot to make these action rolls for at the end of the day or at the end of the roll. It seems like to have a lot of arbitrary decision making. That seems to be where it's going. We'll see. Heath, what do you think of dexterity based resolutions instead of rolling dice? Coin flicking, for example? I've never tried to do a role-playing game like that. I don't want no, but I've played other dexterity games, and those are fun. But I don't know about actually using that as an action mechanic, because I don't want a player's inability to influence something that the character should be good at. I think that's important. And we talked about like that was an issue. Could be an issue with like what was that? The one that markets itself as the most realistic combat system, that you can as a player become good at that combat system. So if you're good at the dexterity thing, then your character is going to be good, when maybe it shouldn't be, and the reverse. So DreamPod 9 silhouette system has flesh and deep wounds and instant death. I have not read that one. Oh, there are board games like this that are fantasy and Western cowboy based. System of a game can make the discussion of a game easier if the system works and harder if it doesn't. All right, so let's see what happens out here. So based on your roll, the GM uses the following guide to decide how the narrative moves forward. On a critical success, you get what you want and a little extra. Take a hope and clear a stress. If you've made an attack roll, you will also deal extra damage equal to the maximum value of your damage dice. See calculating damage. On a success with hope, you pull it off well and get what you want. Take a hope. On a success with fear, you get what you want, but it comes with a cost or consequence. You might take damage, get limited information, attract danger, etc. Additionally, the game master takes fear. So you got to adjudicate that. This is, okay, mark a hope, and we know what that is mechanically. Here, something tells me that there's probably going to be a lot of, okay, just take damage or stress or something. Just to resolve it quickly at the table. On a failure with hope, things don't go to plan. You probably don't get what you want and must face consequences. But you also do take a hope. You probably don't get what you want and must face consequences. Take a hope. On a failure with fear, things go very poorly. You probably don't get what you want and there's a major consequence or complication because of it. Additionally, the GM takes fear. After announcing your roll's result, always look to the GM to find out what happens next. See the GM section making moves. Story is consequence. In Daggerheart, every time you roll the dice, the scene changes in some way. Now we've seen that quite a bit, I think, with some other role-playing games going in this way. And I do like that. It seems like a lot are going in this direction. That we shouldn't ever make a roll to have things not be consequential in some way. I do like that idea. I like that idea. Innerlight says, I also like the rune casting system for resolution from call to adventure and wonder if it could be used in regular RPGs. I don't know that one either. There's no such thing as a role where, it says right here, there's no such thing as a role where nothing happens, because the fiction should constantly be evolving based on the successes and failures of the characters. A failure should never mean that a character simply doesn't get what they want, especially when that would result in a moment of inaction. Every character the players take should yield an active outcome, something that changes the situation they're in. For example, if you fail a roll to pick a lock, it's not just the door that doesn't open. On a failure with hope, it might mean you can hear the rumble of footsteps coming down the hall behind you. The enemies you narrowly escaped before are getting close, and you're going to have to act quickly to find a way through. On a failure with fear, and see, that would make sense to have a failure with on a failure with despair, the door might be magically warded to keep thieves away, causing an arcane alarm to trigger. This also applies to a success with fear, where you might succeed in unlocking the door, but opening it reveals an enemy you didn't know was guarding it. These consequences are what makes the game interesting and drives forward the adventure you're on together. Well, this is we've talked about this quite a bit. This is controversial, right? I mean, it's a particular play style. I mean, all these different play styles are valid, but this one seems to be one that trips a lot of people up. And I have to admit that I understand. I understand. It's a bit more free form. See, but some section. Okay, let's see what you guys are saying. Well, I'll finish my point. This seems we've talked about this kind of thing before, because we've talked about, I think we were using the example of climbing a mountain, and we were saying that this is the fail forward kind of mechanic. That, okay, because I agree with the beginning of this. Let's make the dice roll significant and make sure that something happens as a result of every die roll. We're not going to just, oh, I failed, nothing happened. Okay, can I try again? Arguably, that's bad, and I'm completely on board with that. But then here we're dynamically creating the world based on the dice rolls, right? So that's what we're talking about. Like, well, what if you could, you failed the roll, but what if we let you succeed, but with a major consequence? So, like, you failed your climbing roll to get up the mountain. So I could have you fall off the mountain, but let's say that you succeed in climbing the mountain, but as a result of that failure, you'll be attacked by pterodactyls when you get to the top. You've disturbed some pterodactyls, and you're going to have to fight off the pterodactyls. It depends on what your perspective on what the relationship between the game mechanics and the world is. Here, the world is being dynamically created as a result of the dice rolls. Other players are not going to like that. They're going to wonder, why did my failure to climb the mountain result in a pterodactyl attack? Or why did my failure to pick the lock cause the door to become magically warded. And those are just two different types of play styles here. Let's see. Mike says, I'd try this game, but it sounds like they want it to be a Powered by the Apocalypse game that they are trying to add their own accessories to. Yeah. But wasn't Candela Obscura also very Powered by the Apocalypse? Wasn't that the case? James says that last section made this sound way more like an improv primer and way less of a tabletop RPG. Sometimes you don't get what you want attempt, and that should be okay. It becomes part of the story. Yeah. I'm for, like I said, I'm generally on board with the idea that we need to make something happen with the roles. But that puts a lot of emphasis, that puts a lot on people to dynamically create the world. And does that make sense? James says, I'm not a huge fan of this approach. BGD says, this game evokes concerns that after every die roll, there'll be an awful lot of elaboration and negotiation between players and GMs as to the narrative interpretation of the outcome. Sounds slow. Yeah, we've talked about that as well. We talked about that. I think we're talking about binary, or I was using the terms binary or graded success or failure or something like that. I'm going to do something. I'm going to jump the pit. Yes or no? Okay, that's easy to adjudicate. This number higher you do, this number lower you don't. Another way of doing it is this. There seemed like a lot of stuff to get together to make this roll. And then on the other side, once you've gotten all of this stuff together to make the roll, there's also a lot of adjudication, like BGD is talking about, regarding what that actually means. Hey, Dungeon Conquest. Welcome, welcome, welcome. James says, I remember Candela Obscura being a Blades in the Dark clone. Right. It's entirely playstyle both. I think the dynamic aspect would be a good fit for some groups of players and a bad fit for other. Right. Yeah, this particular style of play right here is going to work for some, and it's not going to work for others. Some players are going to, which was part of my problem with some of Fate when we were trying that out. And and we're reasonably creative people. I mean, the kind of people I play with, we're reasonably creative people, but having to adjudicate all of this on the fly. What did I have frequently used the something about Triceratops. You were only partially successful in like taming the Triceratops or something. James says, to be clear, it's the improv elements that I'm having a hard time with. I'm okay with the succeed, fail gradients as long as total failure success is possible. All right. Here's an example. Okay, let's go through an example here. Okay. Sarah's rogue, Isabella, is trying to run across a narrow parapet to stop the mage that's raining spellfire down on her party. The GM tells Sarah to roll with agility against a difficulty of 15. Isabella's agility is 2, so Sarah rolls the duality dice, adds them together, and adds 2 tokens, representing her +2 modifiers from agility to get her total. Okay, so we're rolling agility, difficulty 15, agility 2. That's only a +2 bonus. So it's only a +2 bonus, and we're rolling D12s, 2 D12s. So we've got a wide range. So we're talking about what's the difference between how often is your skill or your roll going to determine success. This does seem like the dice are going to determine whether your success or failure lie, because that's only a +2 modifier right there. And we've got a possible range of 2 to 24. It's distributed according to a bell curve, but we found out that matters less than I thought that it would. We started to look at the numbers. So here are the possible outcomes. Failure with fear. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 possible outcomes, it's saying. Failure with fear. Sarah rolls 3 on the hope die and 6 on the fear die, +2 from agility for a result of 11 with fear. The GM takes fear because the result with fear, then describes the mage responding quickly to Isabella's maneuver, making an attack roll. If it's successful, it is successful, so the mage knocks her off the parapet with a blast of magic fire and deals damage. Okay, so in this case, that's a response from that mage. So you were trying to run across the parapet, and the mage turned around. You failed, so the mage turned around, made his own attack roll, and blasted her. Failure with hope. Sarah rolls 6 on the hope die and 3 on the fear die, plus 2 from agility. That's 11 with hope. 11 isn't enough to make it safe across safely, so the GM describes the mage seeing Isabella coming and makes an attack, which succeeds. The mage's blast knocks Isabella off balance, leaving her dangling from the parapet. Her progress stalled. Isabella gains hope, but her friends are still in the line of fire. Success with fear. Sarah rolls 5 on the hope die plus a 9, and a 9 plus 2 from agility. That's 16 with fear, a success. The GM takes fear because of the fear die rolling higher, and then asks Sarah to describe how she races across the parapet, dodging the mage's blasts. After her description, the GM says that once Isabella has crossed, she faces her foe head-on, blocking them from attacking the rest of the party. But then the mage reaches out with magic and crumbles the parapet behind Isabella, leaving her trapped. At least the mage isn't attacking her friends, right? Okay, so after her description, the GM says that once Isabella has crossed, she faces her foe head-on, blocking them from attacking the rest of the party. But the mage reaches out with magic and crumbles the parapet behind Isabella, leaving her trapped. Okay. Dungeon Conquest says, I like the more role-playing aspects of the system, similar to Easy D6. Success with hope. Sarah rolls 10 on the hope die and 6 for the fear die plus 2 agility. That's an 18 with hope, a success. She immediately gains a hope, and the GM asks her to describe what it looks like as Isabella runs across the parapet and interrupts the mage's assault on the party. Since Sarah rolled a success with hope, the GM asks what the players want to do next. So maybe elsewhere in here, we're going to talk about exactly what an action is, because that's a lot. Okay, the action here that's being adjudicated by this roll is running across the parapet and stopping the mage from attacking her friends. That's what's trying to be adjudicated here. Not just running across the parapet, or not just making an attack on the mage or something like that. So the action declares, this is what it says up here specifically. She is trying to run across a narrow parapet to stop the mage that is raining spell fire down on her party. On a critical success, Sarah rolls an 8 on the hope die and 8 on the fear die. That's a critical success. Isabella immediately gains a hope and clears a stress. The GM offers Sarah a choice of 2 extras. That kind of sounds like fate there. She can deal damage to the mage or gain advantage on the next roll against the mage. Sarah describes how Isabella races across the parapet and lands a telling blow on the mage, not just stopping their attack on the party, but dealing her weapon damage as well. Since a critical success counts as a roll with hope, the GM asks the players what they want to do next. BGD says, I think this game would be a fairly rough introduction to the RPG hobby for someone completely new. Trying to show this to kids seems like it would be a disaster. To me, it's the opposite of Easy D6. Yeah, I remember when we were looking at Easy D6 going, oh, I think I could play this with my nephews. I don't think I would bring this to my nephews at their age. I mean, they're younger nephews. They're kids. I think I would not play this one with Easy D6. I would not play this with the nephews. I would take Easy D6 instead. Or the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons book, basic set. Special action rolls. Many action rolls just use the above rules. However, some situations require special types of action rolls. These use the following rules. Trait rolls. A trait roll is an action roll that specifically calls for a certain character trait to be used. These rolls often appear on domain cards and say something like roll with presence or roll with agility 12. If there's a number in parenthesis after this trait, that is the difficulty you must meet in order to succeed. If there's no number, it's left to the GM to decide. Attack rolls. All right, let's see about attack rolls. When you make an action roll with the intent to do harm to the enemy, you're making an attack roll. Reference the weapon or spell you're using from the attack and determine what trait it uses. We'll talk more about spell cast rolls in the next section, but for a standard physical or magic weapon attack, use the character trait the weapon requires, see equipment, as well as any experience or other modifiers that are applicable, and resolve it as you would a normal action roll. If you succeed, make a damage roll. Okay. To determine how much harm you do to the target. We should look that up here. By default, each attack roll can only target one enemy, but if a spell or ability allows you to target multiple enemies, roll once and apply that result to all the enemies the attack can hit. If the attack roll meets or exceeds the difficulty of any of these enemies, the attack is successful against that target, but not necessarily against others. Unarmed combat rolls, when making an attack without a weapon, for instance, a punch or a kick, make an attack roll as usual. This uses strength or finesse, but could be any trait depending on how you describe the attack. On a success, your damage dice are a number of D4s equal to half your proficiency rounded up. All unarmed attacks deal physical damage. A spellcast rolls are a type of actions used when you're creating a significant magical effect, often with a domain card. These are called for like this: spellcast roll or spellcast roll 14. Instead of referring to a specific stat on the character sheet, these rolls use the spellcast stat of your class. There is a lot here. If a spellcast roll is intended to damage a target, it is also considered an attack roll. You generally need to be using a specific spell to make a spellcast roll. You can't just make up magical effects, like forming a bridge out of vines, that aren't on your character sheet or cards. However, at the GM's discretion, you might allow you to creatively apply an existing spell in an unusual way. You can always flavor your magic to match the kind of character you're playing, but that flavor shouldn't give you access to effects you wouldn't normally be able to apply to your spells. Examples. Okay, let's take an example here. Tag team rolls. Okay, so an example. If a sorcerer is trying to reach a high cliff above him that doesn't have a spell or ability that lets him get there, he wouldn't be able to make a generic spellcast roll to have magic lift him up into the air and fly him to the cliff. He would need a specific spell or ability that would provide him that kind of magic. If a wizard wants their rune circle spell they just picked up at level 3 to erupt from their wand in sparks, form into a galloping flaming stallion that circles them, and this is the reason why the rune circle gives them protection from enemies, that's awesome and should be highly encouraged. But if they want to do extra damage to an enemy because of this narration, that wouldn't normally be permitted. Each player can choose one time per session to spend 3 hope and initiate a tag team move with another PC. When you do, work with your chosen partner to determine how your two characters combine their action in a unique and exciting way. Both you and your partner make separate action rolls, but before resolving the roll's outcome, choose one of the rolls to apply for both of your results. If you tag team on an attack roll and succeed, you both roll damage as usual, then add it together to determine damage dealt. Okay, let me check the comments and we'll go into damage rolls. Robert says, as I developed the dice rolling mechanics, I noted that GPT likes to improvise. Sometimes it judges the situation will have a failure outcome of 1 to 5, partial success 6 to 15, and total success 6 to 15. The upside is it's improvising adjudication as it goes. Now, perhaps an AI could do that well or badly, but that does sound like something interesting for the AI. The downside is improvising adjudications as it goes. Yes, and results may vary. All right, so how do we deal damage here? What does this mean? So we got a separate damage roll. We're rolling separate damage rolls. When you succeed on an attack roll against an enemy, so I guess we haven't really determined whether or not we have something like an armor class, but it seems like we're going to be rolling against a difficulty with our 2d12 plus all of our other dice. When you succeed on an attack roll against an enemy, you then make a damage roll to determine how much damage and thus what tier of hit points your attack inflicts on the target. The damage dice used to make damage rolls generally are determined by the weapon, spell, or ability you're using to make the attack. If the attack is using a weapon, this weapon's damage dice appears in the active weapons section of the character sheet. If the attack is coming from a spell on a domain card or class feature, it details the damage dice within the text of the move. Okay, when striking with a weapon, you generally roll a number of your weapon's damage dice equal to your proficiency at the top of your active weapons section. When striking with a move that doesn't damage, such as a spell, the text of the move will tell you what kind of damage dice should be rolled. Okay, anytime you roll damage dice, the text tells you what type of die, but not the number of dice to roll. Roll a number of those dice equal to your proficiency. I'm going to have to understand more of that. Because you're going to roll a number of your weapon's damage dice equal to your proficiency at the top of the active weapons section. Unless a spell tells you something otherwise. So, such as do D8 physical damage, that means you've got to look at your weapon proficiency. So we were talking about skills earlier. So we hadn't seen skills, but now we have experience, and now we do have this idea of proficiency in weapons. After rolling your damage dice, add all their values together, and then add any modifiers to determine the result. The GM will mark the corresponding hit points based on that damage. Tip: there's a difference in this game between damage and hit points. Damage is the result of your damage roll, including your damage dice and modifiers. Hit points reflect how hard that damage affects the creature who's taking it. The number of hit points a creature marks depending on factors such as their damage threshold, armor, resistance, and immunity. Yeah, because you don't just, here's your damage dice, you don't just subtract that number of hit points. You have got to check the damage thresholds of your character, of that character being hit. Figure out the number of hit points of damage from there and apply it. That's a lot. It's a lot. So some damage rolls just let you roll a certain number and type of dice without any modifiers. Plus or minus. I mean, it's not necessarily bad. This is all place. It's interesting that there's so much here for a game that seems to be designed to facilitate improv. I guess that's the unique part of this to me. That, yeah, I can see designing this for improv, a lot of improv play. But then counter to that, there's actually a lot of stuff that you have to do. So some damage rolls just tell you to roll a certain number of dice and type without any modifiers. So, for example, 1d8 physical damage. In this case, simply roll the necessary number of dice and add the values together. Example, Cat makes a successful longsword strike with her guardian against a target using an attack roll of 16. They have a weapon proficiency of 2, and their longsword's damage dice are d8s. So they roll 2d8 and get a 3 and a 7 for 10 total damage. Damage with modifiers. Some damage rolls have modifiers on them. Okay. Critical success and damage. If you roll a critical success, roll damage as usual, then add extra damage equal to the maximum potential value of your damage dice added together, as if they all rolled the highest number possible. Rowan makes an attack roll against a target with her short bow and gets 2 7s on the duality die, a critical success. She has a proficiency of 2, so she rolls her bow's damage of 2d8, and they land on a 4 and 8. Because it's a critical success, she automatically does 16 damage, the maximum potential roll on a d8, plus the additional 12 she rolled, bringing her total to 28 points of damage. Multiple sources of damage. For any reason, the damage should be applied more than once to a creature on your turn. That damage should always be totaled together before applying it to damage thresholds. That's important. If for any reason damage should be applied more than once to a creature on your turn. On your turn. Okay, not its turn, not the entire round. Okay. That damage should always be totaled together before applying it. That's still important, though. We do have damage types here. Physical damage and magical damage. Direct damage is physical or magic damage that automatically hits a target. When a PC or DM deals direct damage, they don't need to make an attack roll. We also have resistance and immunity. This limits the amount of damage done. When a creature has resistance to an incoming type of damage, they divide the damage in half, rounding up, before applying it to their thresholds. For example, you deal 25 damage to them, they would instead take only 13 damage. Immunity is 0. Is there anything we else need to look at? Let's go back to the table of contents and see what see if there's something else we need to look at before. We'll go for a little while longer here. But let's see. Let's see what was in this. BGD says the potential for significant damage spikes during combat is definitely a factor in Daggerheart. So what do the death and dying? Oh, that's a good thing. All right, let's look at death and dying. That's a great thing to look at. Okay, so let's see. Let's look at where that would be. For countdown gold. Action rolls. Let's see. Core mechanics. Did we actually not go over here? Flow of combat, player best practices. Now, let's see. Let's see if I can search for death. Because there was some kind of death check or something. Oh, character death. Scaling damage. All right, let's go to character death. There's just something about scaling damage here. Adjudicating and overseeing the death of a player character may be among the most difficult tasks for a game master. In a game focused on character relationships, personal story arcs, and heroic adventure, the death of a player character should not be done casually. As the GM, you're charged with honestly portraying the world, and death is a greater threat in Daggerheart than some other games working in the same genre. Okay, interesting. When a character marks their last hit point, they're forced to make a death move. In only one of these moves is the character guaranteed to live, avoid death, and face consequences. And in one of the others, risk it all, the character has just over a 50% chance of survival. 2 of the 3 moves gives the player full control over whether the character will live or die. With Blaze of Glory, the character is accepting death for the character, and with Avoid Death and Face the Consequences, the player is defying death. Risk it all comes down to a dice roll with an almost a 50% chance of death. It's actually a 44% chance of death, since if the hope and fear die match, the character lives. When a player is forced to choose a death move, make space for them to talk through their decision. You might move to another character to give the player a moment to think, or keep focus on the character on the brink of death to let the player take the reins of the story. In discussing character death, it's important to keep your game's tone and aims in mind. Would this be the fitting end for the character? Would they have died protecting their friends, pursuing their greatest hopes, or confronting their worst fears? Or did they get unlucky during battle that leads into a subplot focused on another character? Character death is not always satisfying in the moment, especially if the character's cause of death isn't directly tied to their personal story. But in a heroic fantasy adventure, death is always a possibility for characters trying to change the world. The death moves gives the fatally injured character a chance for a memorable moment, whether it's going out in a blaze of glory or their fate comes down to one roll of the die. Charlie says, I do not know the system well, but the options for death, I think, are pretty cool. So here are some specific guidance for each of the death moves. Avoid death and face the consequences. This option is the only one to take if a player is 100% certain they aren't ready to say goodbye to their character and do not want to leave survival to chance. The character always survives when using this move, though they have a chance of taking a scar and losing one of their hope slots. If the character only has 1 hope slot remaining when they take this move, there's a chance the player will have to retire the character. That ending may be preferable for the character who would rather see their character give up the adventuring life than die, even if the party's tasks are not yet done. Note that a lower level character is much less likely to take a scar than a high level character, but there's always some chance of taking a scar even at level 1. This design gives more breathing room to low level characters so their story can play out more fully. But as characters gain level, the chances of gaining scars greatly increase, making Risk It All or Blaze of Glory more appealing. By using this move, the character stays unconscious until healed by an ally or until the group's long rest. Try to give the player chances to participate in play if the group isn't able to heal their character or get to a long rest in short order. This might take the form of inviting the player to depict an NPC, or it might involve narrating a scene a character at knife's edge between life and death, visited by the spirit of a departed loved one, receiving a vision of disaster, needed to survive or avert, or something else to let them keep staying involved with play. Even without gaining a scar, the constant cost of this move is the situation gets much worse. Whether that's some kind of escalation that happens due to the other parties tending to the fallen character, or whether the character's misfortune enhances the power of fear at that moment, turning the tide against the heroes. Some guilt for the character is understandable in these situations, but trying to make sure the player does not resent the complication or escalation that happened. But try to make sure the player does not resent the complication or escalation that happened as a result of taking this move. Okay, or risk it all. This is the move that I was looking for some tables to roll on or something right here. So I guess the moves are described elsewhere or something. Risk it all. This is the move where you as the GM have the least say in. The duality dice decide the character's fate, and with rare exceptions, the roll of that dice is final. If the player rolls with hope, help them decide how to divide the value of the hope die between the hit points and stress to clear. You might remind the player that they can choose to clear only a small portion of hit points. They may be forced to make a death move after just one further blow. Okay, what happens if you roll with fate, then you die? If you roll with hope, roll with fear, you die, I guess. I don't know. But if you roll with hope, you get to clear some stuff. Blaze of Glory. If the player decides the character will go out in a blaze of glory, work with them to ensure the one action they take is as meaningful as possible without breaking the integrity of the story. You might rule that when the seraph goes out in a blaze of glory, leaping down the throat of the god shark seeking to swallow the sun, the guardian can deal a fatal blow to the foe, even if they have more HP left than the critical success could possibly deal. But it might be a bad idea to let that same seraph shatter the barrier between the mortal realm and the worlds above, to allow their god to walk freely among mortals. Again, think about the group's agreement about tone when deciding the scale of action the blaze of glory can accomplish. What do people think about that? Haven't we seen something like that in some of the other games? I was actually expecting more with the consequences. When you said, like, I guarantee life, but I'm going to accept the consequences, I thought that was going to be like, your character is going to be shamed and shunned for cowardice or something like that. I thought that's what was going to happen. That there was that seemed to imply what I just read, consequences in the scene, basically, that we're having. But I was expecting that to be consequences, like lasting consequences. We were going down here. Target, gold, downtime, death. Is that when we were... Okay, we didn't look at that one. So death, we just saw embrace death and go out in a blaze of glory. Avoid death and face the consequences. Risk it all. Scars, if you risk it all. This is a separate thing on the same thing. I think organization, because I want to see, like, where's my role? What am I doing? Resurrection, that's possible. Flow of combat. Combat in Daggerheart has no initiatives, no rounds, and no distinct number of actions you can take on your turn. Instead, any fights that happen play out narratively moment to moment, just like any other character action might take. This provides the players opportunities to team up on their tactics, respond appropriately to narrative changes to the scene, and not be locked into only doing violence once the first strike happens. Similarly, enemies don't have a set order in which they act. Instead, the GM will make moves in accordance with the fiction. Sometimes these moves will happen when a player rolls with fear or fails the action they were attempting, but a GM can make a move anytime the narrative demands it. When they make a move, they will usually escalate the scene in an exciting and dangerous way. A character might take an action from some enemies, become vulnerable, or anything else that significantly changes the scene. Michael Connor says, every time I hear rules light, I think the opposite, or no rules, and too much work for GM and players. Well, yeah, we've talked about that too, that sometimes it's very easy to write a rules light role-playing game system, because it's very easy to write, if you roll this, allow the players and game master to collaboratively come up with an acceptable result. It's possible. Yeah, I wanted more. I don't think I've ever actually played in a game with a mechanic like that, but I think I thought that was going to be more significant if you're able to avoid death. action tracker. Whenever there is a combat scenario that is likely to last more than a roll or two, and when play moves to maps and miniatures at the game mechanic, the GM should place an action tracker card on the table within everyone's reach. Whenever PCs make an action roll, they must place a character token on the action tracker. While on the tracker, these are known as action tokens. It's important to note that tokens are not limited. If a player runs out, they should just grab more. The PCs aren't the only ones who use the action tracker, however. The GM spends action tokens to activate adversaries. While the action tracker is on the table, it's important to remember that players may still act in any order they'd like and take action multiple times in a row as the narrative flow demands it, which is actually the opposite of the way I would be going. I'm curious to know how all this plays out. The game, because you have a situation here. It seems like you have a potential situation. You got to manage the actual players here. If you have more outgoing players, you don't want them to dominate and take over and do all the actions. If you have more shy players at the table, you've got to make sure that they are also involved. So one way to make sure that everyone is involved and nobody's dominating is by giving everybody a turn and telling them what they can do on their turn. Whereas this is much more free form. So if everybody is an extrovert improv expert, then I guess that's okay. But you got to be monitoring that as the game master. I suppose that would be the game masters. I mean, other players also want to make sure other players are engaged, or should. But the game master, I suppose, is the one who would be ultimately responsible for that. The game should continue as normal. The GM has an additional tool at their disposal to help guide the combat encounter. However, players are encouraged to give others turns with the spotlight. If another player hasn't placed any tokens on the action tracker recently, consider letting them act if they want to before you do anything else. So I guess that's if you're seeing everybody's actions on this card, which is helping you to visually understand how much each player has done. So like if you see that there aren't very many action tokens on the table from a certain character, certain player, you need to go over and talk to them. Or make sure that you kind of shift the action to them. Galaxy for Fox Night Sky says, yes, GM, I want to move and then cast Create Water and then cast Call Lightning 6 times, please. Yeah, so this is an entirely narrative and improv way to try to stop that from happening. Because one of the examples was that the Isabella runs across the parapet and disrupts the mage, right? So for example 1, Emerson places a character token on the action tracker, bringing the total tokens on the tracker up to 3, then makes a roll to strike the enemy he's in melee with and gets a success with fear. He describes how he comes down with his sword in an overhead swing and deals 12 points of damage, but because the roll was with fear, the GM also makes a move. Example 2, Elise takes 3 tokens off of the action tracker. Wait, takes it off of the action tracker? When do you take things off the action tracker? Elise takes 3 tokens off the action tracker, spending the first 2 to end the vulnerable condition on a nearby adversary who breaks free from the vines that were binding them. She spends the next token on the adversary Emerson just hit with the sword, describing the enemy's warhammer being pulled out of the mud and swung at Emerson's ribs. Elise rolls for damage and totals it up for 9 physical damage. This falls. So wait, what is so? The game master is taking the game. Is Elise the game master? So is that how we're adjudicating? Okay, the players are putting action tokens on there, and then once they're on there, the game master is using them to move. Is that what's happening here? She spends the next token on the adversary Emerson just hit with the sword, describing the enemy's warhammer being pulled out of the mud and swung at Emerson's ribs. Elise rolls for damage and totals up for 9 physical damage. This falls within Emerson's major threshold, but he marks 2 armor slots and rolls 2d6. The total is 5, so he reduces the damage down to 4 and takes only 1 hit. Oh, we're rolling armor too here? Okay, we hadn't gotten to that. So this falls within Emerson's major threshold, but he chooses to mark 2 armor slots. So that sounds like a resource you're also managing, and rolls 2d6. 1d6 per armor slot. The total is 5, so he reduces the damage down to 4 and takes only 1 hit point. With the last token, Elise describes an adversary sprinting all the way across the battlefield to get to the massive bell that would call in reinforcements. As he prepares to ring it, Elise turns back to the players asking, "What do you do now?" So activating adversary. Was that out of order? Activating adversaries. When the GM makes a move, they may choose to spend any number of the tokens currently on the action tracker. For each token they spend, so it's not just a constant count up that's telling you how often people are moving, because the action tokens are also coming off the center. For each token they spend, they can activate an adversary on the battlefield to take an action. This could be casting a spell, making an attack, ending a temporary condition, etc. Think of this action tracker as the GM catching the actions of the adversaries up to where the players are in the fiction. The GM's turn lasts until they are exhausted all available tokens. That's important. The GM's turn lasts until they have exhausted all available tokens. This is very different from other games that I've played anyway. Or they wish to utilize at this time. Once they are done spending action tokens, play returns to the PCs. Typically, the GM should not activate the same adversary twice within a single turn, no matter how many tokens they have available. If they would like to activate the adversary again, they should do so on their next turn, when a PC rolls a failure, or with fear, returning play to the GM. At any time, the GM may clear 2 tokens from the action tracker in exchange for 1 fear. Similarly, the GM may exchange 1 fear to place 2 additional tokens on the action tracker. When the combat has come to a close, the GM determines the action tracker is no longer necessary for play. Any remaining tokens become fear for the GM at a 2-to-1 ratio. We haven't really figured out what fear does yet. Well, what is the purpose of... Okay, we're going to go for just a few more minutes here, because this is different. Let's go over here to the comments. James says, this is attempting to govern player behavior, which we all know how much I love it when books tell me how to play. I know, that sounded out of order. That did sound out of order. This example is terribly written. You can't understand example 2 without reading the following paragraph first. I think that is out of order. That must be something that is going to be called out because of the alpha. Galaxy Fox says, I think this can totally work, in my opinion, if everyone around the table, be it in real life or online, is both willing to talk to and listen and is civil about their turn, and more important, about including others. My personal homebrew fix would be if anyone has 3 or 4 action tokens, and they return to you once all other players have expended their tokens as well. That everyone has 3 or 4 action tokens, and they return to you once all the players have expended all their action tokens as well. That could work. So you can't. It's not unlimited. You've got a certain number of action tokens that you can play, and everybody's got to do that. So that means there are like 3 different places that the action tokens can sit on the table: in the player's hand, on the action token, on the action tracker, and then in some kind of reserve. So as the game master expends them, they go to some other reserve. Then once they're all spent, once they're all in the reserve, they're redistributed to the players. I kind of like the way that's going. James says, I actually 80% like how they handle armor. It shouldn't be entirely player elective, but I love accounting for degradation and flat mitigation. Len says, I kind of like the philosophy behind this, but I'm not sure how smoothly it would play at the table. Yeah, I like that idea, Galaxy Fox. This way, they are still free to do bigger actions or spend actions whenever they want, but no one takes too many turns. Oh, Galaxy says, fear activates the GM monsters, or, for example, makes a negative complication, like I open the door with fear, and there's a lock on the door. Right, yes. Fear does that, right. I was talking about the accumulation of fear by the game master. So let's give it our example. Example, the warrior of the party just makes a successful attack roll with fear against one of their adversaries. The party is facing off with a group of bandits trying to steal a chest of treasure. The group is transporting for an ally. After the warrior has dealt damage, because they rolled with fear, play passes to the GM. The GM has 4 tokens on the action tracker and decides to spend them as a move. There are currently 4 tokens on the action tracker. Okay, all right. So I'm understanding a little bit more. So as long as it rolls with hope, is going to still pass to another player. Another player gets to take a turn. If this is the way we're going. I rolled with hope, took my action. I rolled with hope, with success or fear or whatever. Play passes to another player. That player takes a move, puts their action token on the action tracker. rolls with fear. That's how you're balancing, like, because the two things that happened on the player side, now we rolled with fear. We're going over to the game master. The game master can do 2 actions with the bad guys. So James says, so what is the base assumption? That all players are generally selfish and incapable of playing to allow others, especially more timid or new players, at the table? I dismissed that entirely. Well, that's not necessarily how I would put it. BG says, too many bankable meta currencies in play give this RPG a very board game feel. That can be an acquired taste. It's undeniably complex and not very rules light. I do not understand how you would describe this as rules light. I really don't. I mean, not that it's extra heavy. I mean, it's not that this is like I said, it's not like the crunchiest game I've ever read. But if I were sitting here writing this, I would not describe this to somebody as a rules light RPG. I don't mind the more board game type elements of it, personally. I've gone to that kind of gaming. I used to be very simulationist and wouldn't have liked that. But I'm kind of drifting in that direction. Okay, so there are currently 4 tokens on the action tracker. On the battlefield are 2 ribbit bandits and is that the frog guys? A ribbit bandit? And a group of minions. The GM spends 1 token to activate the first bandit. The GM describes to have this bandit leap down from a nearby tree to slide beneath the party's traveling wagon, breaking off some of the wooden floorboards to get to the treasure inside. The GM spends a 2nd token to activate the second bandit, a large bullfrog-like figure with a heavy armor. They leap down and put themselves between a few members of the party and swing a massive hammer using an adversary move that allows them to hit all targets within range of their weapon. The GM rolls against the PC's evasion and succeeds. They then roll the damage dice and deal 12 points of physical damage to all of them. Some of the PCs use armor to reduce the damage, and each marks their sheet accordingly. The GM spends the 3rd token and spends fear and also spends fear to use the group attack move. This moves all the minions into melee range of the warrior. The GM makes an attack, describes the scene rolling against the warrior's evasion. The GM succeeds, so the horde deals 3 damage each for a total of 15 points of damage to the warrior. The warrior has no armor slots left, so they take major damage, marking 2 hit points. There's 1 more token left to spend, but no more adversaries left to activate, so the GM returns play to the PCs. So what is the purpose of the action tracker? Yeah, James says, that's how this feels to me. Maybe I'm reading into it too much and not allowing enough benefit of the doubt. Oh, Galaxy says, I think the board game idea might just help onboard certain players. I think, personally, this is a rules-free flowing game. A rules-free flowing game, not rules light. The rules that are there are more free flow, so they're more open to creative storytelling, but definitely not rules light. That could be a good way of saying that. Yeah, and Len says, accurate assessment, I think. Because there is a lot of free flow. There's a lot of free flow. There's a lot of improvisation, but there does seem like a lot that you're supposed to be keeping track of and rolling and all of that. So what is the purpose of the action tracker? While role-playing combat uses theater of the mind, it's easy to turn our focus from one portion of the while role-playing combat using theater of the role-playing is the verb. While role-playing combat using theater of the mind, it's easy to turn our focus from one portion of the conflict to another, knowing that off-camera other action is occurring and we'll see it when we get our attention to that portion of the battlefield. When we utilize maps and minis, it can feel odd to see portions of the battlefield change while others remain frozen. The action tracker allows the entire table to keep track of the portions of combat the group is focused on, then center other areas of the conflict and catch up in time. In this way, it helps the GM and the table as a whole have an idea of who has acted and who might need an opportunity to be showcased. For more on using the action tracker to spotlight players, visit the GM section on sharing the spotlight. In addition, the addition of tokens to the tracker also provides a clear currency for the players to track and anticipate the GM's moves. While the players take a large number of actions in a row, the tracker fills, providing the GM with more currency to spend on their turn, raising the stakes. Okay, well, interesting. I mean, a lot of this is very different, so we'll see. I might see if I can find somebody trying it out and playing. But with 377 pages, there's a lot more to go through and try to understand. But it did say that you could, as a first stop, like try to play the adventure, the self-play, the initial adventure, which I think is good. I like the games now that come with here's an adventure and guides you through the game. I like that. I like that a lot. Oh, Galaxy says, actually, I have played and personally found instead of one player taking 8 actions and others not at all, I really found that they felt like they could only use one action to make sure the others got a turn. Okay. Okay. So they really wanted, your players really wanted to make sure they were passing it around kind of 1-to-1. All right. Well, I've got a lot to do today. I got to go cut grass. I got to get ready for RavenCon, which, by the way, let's go ahead and bring that up. Let me bring this down. If you're here and you want to play games with us, we're going to be playing games next Saturday online in the RavenCon, in the Ravenkeep Virtual Tavern. We got a great system set up. Some of you may have already seen the trailer for that. If you would like to play games with us, let me bring this up right here. Please sign up right here. RavenCon, sign up right here. Sign up to play games. Right here. I've enjoyed that. Please sign up right there. And let me also give you the Discord server. If you're here and you're not part of the Discord server, let me click invite and come on into the Ravenkeep Discord server. Get your links. Robert says RavenCon is great. So we'll set up a schedule. I'll post in the Discord server about that. I'll probably also post to the YouTube community section and things like that. But also, so if you're signed up, there and you're in the Discord server, you will know about it. I've got to. That's a major thing I've got to organize today. Maybe next week things will get back to some kind of semblance of schedule. I'm not flying out to Austin next week. And I'm looking forward to moving forward in a big way. So, all right, everybody have a wonderful day. Have a happy Easter. Go forth, be creative, be constructive. And I will see you Tuesday night. The next time I suppose I'll see you live is on Tuesday night for Table Talk on the Table Talk channel. We'll be talking to Lucy Williams. All right, later, everybody. Enjoyed it so much.